In the early morning hours of August 15th, 2002, a horrific discovery was made that would shake the small town of Bassett, Virginia. The day began like any other for Chris Thompson, an employee of Michael Short's mobile home moving business. Thompson was scheduled to meet his employer at the Short family residence just before 9 a.m. The plan was to drive together to Christiansburg to pick up a truck for the business. However, as Thompson approached the property located off US Route 220, he immediately sensed that something was amiss. The first unusual detail that caught his attention was the open garage door. While this might not have been cause for alarm on its own, it was an odd sight given the early hour. Expecting to find Michael Short either working on a vehicle or perhaps still asleep, Thompson made his way into the garage. What he found instead would haunt him for years to come. There, on a couch where Michael often slept to avoid disturbing his wife with his snoring, lay the lifeless body of 50-year-old Michael Short. He had been shot once in the head with what investigators would later determine to be a small caliber weapon. The precision of the shot and the lack of defensive wounds suggested that Michael had been killed while he slept, unaware of the danger that had entered his home. Shocked and disoriented by the scene, Thompson made the decision to search for other members of the Short family. With growing dread, he entered the main house. Inside, the scene that greeted him was equally horrific. In the master bedroom, he found the body of 36-year-old Mary Short. Like her husband, Mary had been shot once in the head while lying in bed. As Thompson moved through the house, a realization began to dawn on him. There was no sign of the Short's 9-year-old daughter, Jennifer. Her absence from the crime scene would soon transform this double homicide into a complex investigation involving multiple jurisdictions and law enforcement agencies. Upon discovering the bodies, Thompson contacted the Henry County Sheriff's Office. One of the most significant pieces of evidence found at the scene were two .22 caliber shell casings. Investigators discovered one casing near Michael's body in the garage and another next to Mary in the bedroom. This discovery not only confirmed the use of a small caliber weapon, but also supported the theory that both victims had been killed by the same perpetrator using the same firearm. The choice of a .22 caliber weapon was noteworthy as it's a relatively quiet firearm. This detail suggested that the killer may have been trying to minimize noise, possibly to avoid alerting neighbors or other family members. Perhaps one of the most chilling pieces of evidence was the discovery that the phone lines to the house had been cut. This deliberate act pointed to an unsettling level of premeditation. The killer had clearly planned their attack in advance, taking steps to prevent the victims from calling for help. The timeline of the crime became a crucial element of the investigation. Based on when Chris Thompson had last seen the family alive and when he discovered the bodies, authorities established that the attack on the Short family occurred sometime after midnight on August 14th. This window would prove challenging for investigators as they attempted to piece together the events of that fateful night. As investigators combed through the Short family home, they made another disturbing discovery. In Jennifer's bedroom, they noted several signs of disturbance. Her mattress had been moved about 2 inches from its usual position, her sheets were pulled back, and her pillow was found on the floor. These details painted a picture of Jennifer's likely abduction from her bed, adding a new layer of urgency to the investigation. Interestingly, despite the violent nature of the crime, there were no signs of forced entry into the home. This led investigators to consider the possibility that the Shorts may have known their attacker, or at least that the perpetrator had found a way to enter the home without arousing suspicion. Another puzzling aspect of the crime scene was the apparent lack of robbery as a motive. Investigators found approximately $600 in cash left untouched on the kitchen counter, along with blank checks belonging to the Shorts. The presence of these valuables ruled out theft as the primary motivation for the murders. As the investigation progressed, law enforcement expanded their search beyond the immediate crime scene. They scoured the surrounding farmland, groves, and woods, employing a wide array of resources including helicopters, search dogs, and four-wheel drive vehicles. However, their efforts to locate Jennifer or uncover additional evidence were hampered by intermittent rain in the days following the discovery of the bodies. The sheriff's office kept the Shorts' home closed off to their loved ones for more than 2 weeks, carefully scanning every inch of the property for potential clues. They collected an extensive amount of DNA evidence from the home, though officials have never specified the exact nature or quantity of this evidence. In official affidavits, it was revealed that approximately 66 items were removed from the home as evidence. Among the items collected were a 12-gauge Winchester shotgun and a box of 12-gauge shotgun shells. While these weren't believed to be the murder weapon, they were taken for thorough examination. A .22 caliber rifle and a partial box of .22 caliber ammunition were also collected, given their potential connection to the shell casings found at the scene. Investigators also seized a computer disk and unidentified documents contained in a briefcase. These items could potentially hold valuable information about the Short family's personal and business affairs, which might shed light on possible motives or suspects. One intriguing piece of evidence was a reported note found on the kitchen table. The contents of this note have remained a mystery, with authorities never publicly disclosing what, if anything, was written on it. In the days following the discovery of the crime, law enforcement conducted extensive interviews with family members, friends, and associates of the family. Chris Thompson, who had been with the Shorts the night before their murder, was questioned extensively. He reportedly told police that when he had left late on the evening of August 14th, the entire family was still alive and well, and Jennifer had already gone to bed. Thompson was presumably cleared as a suspect, with officers stating that he was open and cooperative throughout the investigation. Given that the Shorts had recently put their home on the market, investigators also pulled real estate records to see who had recently toured the family's home. This line of inquiry was based on the theory that the perpetrator might have used property viewings as an opportunity to familiarize themselves with the layout of the house. However, it's unclear whether this led to any significant leads. As news of the murders and Jennifer's disappearance spread, the community rallied together. Volunteers joined law enforcement in the search efforts, combing through the rural landscape surrounding the Short property. Amber alerts were issued, and Jennifer's information and picture were displayed on billboards across Virginia. Despite these extensive efforts, no trace of the young girl was found in the immediate aftermath of the crime. The investigation quickly grew to involve multiple agencies, including the Virginia State Police and the FBI. The complexity of the case, involving a double homicide and a missing child, demanded a coordinated effort from various law enforcement bodies. The FBI's involvement brought additional resources and expertise to the investigation, including access to their extensive fingerprint database and advanced forensic capabilities. In the weeks following the murders, investigators pursued numerous leads and theories. They looked into Michael Short's business, exploring the possibility of disgruntled employees or customers. They also examined the family's financial records and personal relationships, searching for any conflicts or issues that might have led to such a violent act. The lack of an obvious motive continued to perplex investigators. The execution-style killings suggested a personal motive, yet the abduction of Jennifer didn't seem to fit in. Authorities found themselves grappling with multiple theories. Was this a targeted attack on the parents with Jennifer's abduction as an afterthought, or was Jennifer the primary target with her parents killed to facilitate her abduction? As the investigation continued, authorities employed various techniques to generate leads. They released a composite sketch of a man seen near the Short home on the morning of the murders, described as having a weathered complexion and driving a white single-cab flatbed truck. However, this lead, like many others, did not result in a breakthrough in the case. The investigation took an unusual turn when Michael Short's remains were exhumed on September 4th, 2002, for what authorities described as forensic purposes. While this fueled speculation about potential paternity issues related to Jennifer, police denied these claims, stating that the exhumation was to obtain hair samples that had not been taken during the initial autopsy. As days turned into weeks with no sign of Jennifer, the focus of the investigation began to shift. The hope that she might be found alive began to fade, replaced by a grim determination to uncover the truth about what had happened to the victims. Fast forward to September 25th, 2002, approximately 6 weeks after Jennifer's disappearance, a grim discovery was made in Rockingham County, North Carolina, about 35 miles south of the Short family home in Virginia. The discovery was made by Eddie Albert, a local resident of Rockingham County. Albert initially found what he thought was a piece of a wig on his property. This seemingly innocuous find would soon lead to a heartbreaking revelation. 2 days after this initial discovery, Albert's dogs brought him what appeared to be a fragment of a human skull. Realizing the potential significance of this find, Albert promptly contacted the authorities. Law enforcement quickly responded to the property, which included a creek that ran through his yard, spanned by a bridge. The area became the focus of an intensive search operation. As investigators combed through the creek bed and the area under the nearby bridge, they began to uncover more human remains. The search of the creek and surrounding area yielded only about a quarter of a skeleton. The remains were scattered, suggesting that they had been there for some time and possibly moved by natural forces such as water currents or animal activity. Among the recovered remains were Jennifer's skull with a full head of hair, leg bones, part of her jaw, rib cage bones, and 16 teeth. The discovery of the remains was a shock to the Albert family and the local community. One statement mentioned that members of the family reported that they had found the child's teeth in their driveway. What they had initially believed to be their dog playing with a turtle shell turned out to be part of Jennifer's skull. Initially, there was some uncertainty about whether the remains belonged to Jennifer. The police initially told the media that they didn't believe the remains were Jennifer's because the hair didn't match hers. However, by early October, DNA testing conducted at a lab in Roanoke, Virginia, confirmed what many had feared. The remains did indeed belong to Jennifer Short. Further examination of the remains revealed that, like her parents, Jennifer also suffered a single gunshot to the head. In the wake of the discovery, law enforcement intensified their efforts to find the killer. They began to look more closely at the area where Jennifer's remains were found, hoping it might provide clues to the killer's identity or connections to the region. In October 2002, authorities named Garrison Bowman, a 60-year-old carpenter from Madison, North Carolina, as a material witness and later a potential suspect. Suspicion fell on Bowman due to several factors. He had last been seen in the area on August 15, 2002, the day after the Shorts were killed. Adding to the suspicion, Bowman had left a note in his mailbox stating that he had moved to Alaska, but deputies noted that he had asked for his mail to be forwarded to an address in Pennsylvania. Law enforcement seized 9 maps from his mobile home on September 28, 2002. One of these maps was marked to show the location of the Shorts' home, which intensified suspicion against him. Despite the circumstantial evidence, authorities were careful not to label Bowman as a definitive suspect. Sheriff Sam Page stated, "He has not been listed as a suspect, but we do need to talk to him. We know where he's at and we will be interviewing him at a later time." Bowman was eventually located in Canada and interviewed by authorities. He vehemently denied any involvement in the murders. In a 2004 interview with the News and Record of Greensboro, Bowman stated, "This will hang over me for the rest of my life unless they find the person who did it." He claimed he never met the Short family and would never have harmed them. He cooperated with the investigation, providing DNA samples and submitting to questioning. By 2007, authorities officially cleared him as a suspect. The focus on Bowman had consumed thousands of investigative hours, which some critics argue may have diverted resources from other potential leads. Hyunjong Song, who is often referred to as Cindy, was born in Seoul, South Korea on February 25, 1980. Growing up, she developed a fascination with American culture from a young age. Her mother later shared that Cindy said she loved the United States and would like to travel the world. This early interest in American life would shape the course of Cindy's future in profound ways. As a child in Seoul, Cindy was known for her infectious energy and enthusiasm. This vibrant personality would become a defining characteristic throughout her life, endearing her to friends and family alike. Cindy's brother Ki-hoon played a significant role in her early life. The siblings grew up together in Seoul, sharing the typical experiences of Korean youth in the 1980s and early 1990s. Their close relationship would later prove crucial during the difficult times that lay ahead. As Cindy entered her teenage years, her desire to experience American culture firsthand grew stronger. The opportunity to turn this dream into reality came in 1995 when Cindy was 16 years old. With the support of her family, she made the bold decision to move to the US to live with relatives and continue her education. That summer, Cindy left behind the familiar surroundings of her birthplace and embarked on a journey to Springfield, Virginia. Upon arriving there, Cindy moved in with her aunt and uncle, who would become her guardians in the United States. Her aunt, young Kim, would later play an important role in sharing information about Cindy's life in America. Adjusting to life in a new country presented numerous challenges for the 16-year-old. She had to navigate a different educational system, improve her English language skills, and adapt to American cultural norms. Despite these obstacles, Cindy's natural enthusiasm and adaptability served her well during this transition period. Her American education began at Hayfield Secondary School in Alexandria. For a year and a half, she immersed herself in the American high school experience, making new friends and embracing the opportunities available to her. After her time at the school, Cindy transferred to Randolph-Macon Academy, a private coeducational college preparatory school in Front Royal, Virginia. This change in schools provided Cindy with a more rigorous academic environment and additional opportunities to prepare for college life. As Cindy progressed through her high school years, she began to set her sights on college. Her positive experiences in the United States had reinforced her desire to continue her education in America, and she began researching universities that aligned with her interests and goals. In 1998, Cindy's hard work and dedication paid off when she was accepted to Pennsylvania State University. In the fall of 1998, Cindy began her freshman year at Penn State, embarking on a new chapter in her American journey. She chose to major in integrative arts, a unique program that combined elements of engineering, communications, and science. Academically, Cindy continued to excel at Penn State. She maintained solid grades throughout her college career, impressing her professors and peers alike. By the fall of 2001, Cindy had entered her senior year in college. She was on track to graduate in the spring of 2002, with plans to pursue a career in graphic design. Her future seemed bright, filled with the promise of success in her chosen field. Fast forward to Halloween night in 2001, Cindy decided to take a break from her studies and celebrate the holiday with friends. This decision would lead to a night of festivities that tragically became her last known appearance. Cindy, along with her friends Stacy Paik and Lisa Kim, planned to attend a costume party at Players Nightclub, a popular venue located on College Avenue in State College, Pennsylvania. The club, which has gone through several name changes over the years, was a staple of Penn State's nightlife scene. For her costume, Cindy chose to dress as a Playboy bunny, which consisted of a white tennis skirt, a pink t-shirt with a bunny logo, brown knee-high boots, and bunny ears. On the outside, she wore a red hooded parka. However, her friends were quick to point out that Cindy's interpretation of the costume was more cute than revealing. Throughout the night, Cindy was observed speaking with several young men. Among these interactions, she seemed to particularly hit it off with a pair of twins. These conversations were later noted by investigators, who would attempt to locate and interview these individuals as potential witnesses. The Halloween party at the club continued until 2 a.m. on November 1st when the club closed as per local regulations. At this point, Cindy and her friends left the venue, but their night was far from over. They made their way to a friend's apartment located in the Park Hill complex, approximately half a mile northeast of the club. At the apartment, the group engaged in more low-key activities. They spent about an hour playing video games and socializing. As the early morning hours progressed, the friends began to consider heading home. At around 3:30 a.m., Stacy offered to drive Cindy back to her apartment. Cindy lived at 349 Clinton Avenue, several miles west of where they had been spending the last hour. The drive from the Park Hill complex to Cindy's apartment likely took about 15 to 20 minutes given the distance and the time of night. At approximately 4 a.m. on November 1st, Stacy's car pulled up outside Cindy's apartment building. Detective Brian Sprinkle, who would later work on the case, told the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette that Stacy, quote, watched her go up to the apartment but not in the door before driving off. This detail would become a point of focus in the subsequent investigation. It left a small window of uncertainty about whether Cindy actually made it inside her apartment that night. As Stacy drove away, she had no reason to suspect that anything was amiss. From her perspective, she had just seen her friend safely home after a fun Halloween night out. Little did she know that this would be the last time anyone would see Cindy. In the hours and days that followed, the events of this Halloween night would be scrutinized and analyzed by investigators, friends, and family, all trying to understand what happened to Cindy after she was dropped off at her apartment. The investigation into the disappearance began on November 4th, when her friend Stacy reported her missing to the Ferguson Township Police Department. This report came after Cindy had failed to show up for classes and work on Thursday and Friday, which was highly unusual for her. Upon receiving the missing person report, the police department immediately launched an investigation. However, the initial response faced some challenges. As it was a weekend, the case was initially handled by patrol officers, with Detective Sprinkle only starting the full investigation on Monday. This delay of a few days would later be criticized as potentially crucial time lost in the early stages of the investigation. When police first entered Cindy's apartment, they found a scene that raised more questions than answers. The apartment was locked and there were no signs of forced entry or struggle, which initially suggested that Cindy had left voluntarily. However, the items found in the apartment painted a puzzling picture. Inside, investigators discovered Cindy's backpack, which contained her cell phone. This was a significant find, as Cindy's friends noted that she never went anywhere without it. The presence of the phone in her apartment suggested that if Cindy had left, it was likely not planned or for an extended period. On the bathroom counter, police found the fake eyelashes Cindy had been wearing as part of her Halloween costume. This detail indicated that Cindy had indeed returned to her apartment after the party and had begun to remove her costume. However, curiously, the rest of her costume, including the distinctive brown knee-high boots she had been wearing, was nowhere to be found in the apartment. Another puzzling detail was the absence of Cindy's purse, which contained her driver's license and various cards. The missing purse suggested that Cindy might have left her apartment again after initially returning home, perhaps to run an errand. As the investigation progressed, detectives uncovered several items in Cindy's apartment that suggested she had not planned to disappear. They found 2 tickets for an upcoming Britney Spears concert, a receipt for a new computer that was due to be delivered on November 6th, and a printed letter and resume for a graphic design internship she was hoping to secure for the following year. These future plans indicated that Cindy had every intention of continuing her life as normal, making her sudden disappearance all the more baffling. Detective Sprinkle and his team began to meticulously analyze Cindy's recent activities and communications. They checked her phone records but found no calls made or received after she arrived back at her apartment around 4 a.m. on November 1st. Similarly, an examination of her credit card and bank statements revealed no activity after that time. Investigators also delved into Cindy's email accounts, including both her Penn State email and personal AOL account. However, this failed to uncover any suspicious correspondence or hints about her whereabouts. As part of their initial investigation, police conducted extensive interviews with Cindy's friends, particularly those who had been with her on the night of October 31st. Stacy and Lisa, who had attended the Halloween party with Cindy, were questioned multiple times. They provided detailed accounts of the evening, including their time at the club and the subsequent visit to a friend's apartment at the Park Hill complex. The police also interviewed Cindy's roommate, who had returned from a family trip on the afternoon of November 1st. Her statement that she found the apartment locked and empty when she returned helped investigators narrow down the time frame of Cindy's disappearance. As the investigation into the disappearance progressed, several theories and leads emerged, each offering potential explanations for the vanishing. In the early stages, authorities considered several possibilities. The theory of voluntary departure was quickly dismissed due to the lack of evidence supporting it. Cindy had left behind her cell phone, which friends noted she never went anywhere without. Additionally, she had future plans indicating she had no intention of leaving. Investigators also considered but deemed it unlikely given Cindy's recent activities and demeanor. Her friends reported that she was in good spirits on the night of her disappearance, and there were no indications of ideation. As time passed without any sign of Cindy, abduction became the primary theory. The circumstances of her disappearance, including the missing items from her apartment and the lack of any communication, pointed towards the possibility of foul play. One of the earliest theories developed by investigators was that Cindy might have left her apartment voluntarily after returning home, possibly to visit a nearby 24-hour market. This theory was based on several factors. Cindy's purse, containing her keys, driver's license, and credit cards, was not found in her apartment. This suggested she might have taken these items with her if she had left voluntarily. Cindy's friends mentioned that it wasn't unusual for her to make late-night trips to stores for snacks or household items. Additionally, the bunny costume Cindy had been wearing was not found in her apartment, leading investigators to speculate she might have still been wearing it when she left. To pursue this lead, investigators attempted to review surveillance footage from nearby 24-hour establishments, including a giant food store and a Walmart. However, they encountered a significant setback when they discovered that the surveillance tapes had already been recorded over by the time they sought to review them. A few days after Cindy's disappearance, a potentially significant lead emerged from Philadelphia, nearly 200 miles from State College. An anonymous witness reported seeing a woman matching Cindy's description in Philadelphia's Chinatown district. The witness claimed to have seen a young Asian woman resembling Cindy inside a vehicle with an unidentified male. According to the witness, the woman was crying out for help, but the man interrupted her and told the witness to leave. Based on the witness's description, a police artist created a composite drawing of the alleged abductor. He was described as a man with olive to light brown complexion and medium-length hair. However, this information proved challenging to verify. The witness's story reportedly changed several times during subsequent interviews. Investigators were unable to corroborate the sighting with any other witnesses or evidence. The significant distance between State College and Philadelphia raised questions about how Cindy could have traveled so far without leaving any trace. Despite these challenges, authorities continued to pursue this lead, hoping to identify and question the man described by the witness. They emphasized that he was not considered a suspect, but rather a person of interest who might have valuable information. In 2003, a startling lead emerged that would become one of the most controversial aspects of the case. Hugo Selensky, a man later convicted of multiple murders, became a suspect in Cindy's disappearance. The connection to him came through an informant named Paul Weekly, who was facing felony burglary charges. Weekly provided a shocking account to the police, claiming that Selensky and an accomplice, Michael Kurkowski Jr., had seen Cindy on the night of her disappearance. According to Weekly, Selensky and Kurkowski mistook Cindy for a prostitute and abducted her. Weekly alleged that they kept Cindy imprisoned in a walk-in safe at Selensky's home until she died. He further claimed that they buried Cindy's body in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. This lead took a gruesome turn when investigators searched Selensky's property. 5 bodies were discovered buried on his land. 2 of the bodies were identified as Michael Kurkowski and his girlfriend Tammy Fassett. Bone fragments belonging to 2 drug dealers were found in a burn pit, along with remains of an unidentified third person. Selensky allegedly provided his own version of events to the police. He claimed that he and Kurkowski had indeed abducted a woman matching Cindy's description. According to him, Kurkowski had kept Cindy's bunny ears as a souvenir of the crime. Selensky stated that he had killed Kurkowski after learning about the souvenir. However, this lead faced several challenges. Investigators were unable to find concrete evidence linking Selensky to Cindy's disappearance. He was acquitted of some murder charges but convicted of 2 counts of abuse of a corpse in March 2006. A grand jury investigation into Selensky's case revealed issues of witness intimidation and potential collusion between Selensky, his attorney, and a private investigator. As the investigation continued, several other leads and theories were explored. A woman living near Cindy reported a man exposing himself outside her window in September 2001. Investigators considered whether this incident might be related to Cindy's disappearance. Detectives thoroughly investigated the people Cindy interacted with at the Halloween party, including a pair of twins she seemed to hit it off with. However, these leads did not yield any significant breakthroughs. About a month before her disappearance, Cindy had experienced a breakup with her boyfriend, Richard Che. While this was initially considered as a potential factor, Cindy's friends believed she had largely moved on from the breakup by the time of her disappearance. Some speculated that Cindy might have been a victim of human trafficking, especially given the reported sighting in Philadelphia. However, no concrete evidence emerged to support this theory. Stephen Clark's story begins in Colchester, Essex, where he was born on August 30th, 1969, to parents Charles and Doris Clark. The Clarks, who had met while serving on the police force, would soon face challenges that would shape their son's life dramatically. When Stephen was around 2 years old, the family was living near Edinburgh, Scotland. It was during this time that a life-altering incident occurred. One day, Doris left the house to go shopping, unaware that young Stephen had somehow managed to follow her out. In a heart-stopping moment, she heard a commotion and discovered that Stephen had wandered into the road in the town of Kirkliston, where he was hit by a truck. The accident was severe, leaving the boy with significant injuries. He spent a month in a coma, and the aftermath of the incident left him with permanent disabilities. His left arm was severely damaged, and he suffered injuries to his leg that resulted in a pronounced limp. His ability to walk was described as severely impaired, a condition that would make him easily recognizable and unfortunately more vulnerable. In the early 1980s, when Stephen was still a young boy, his family made the decision to move to South Africa, where Stephen stayed for about 10 years. In the early 1990s, when Stephen was around 20 years old, the Clarks made the decision to return to the United Kingdom. They initially settled in Guildford, Surrey, but their stay there was relatively brief. In the summer of 1991, the family relocated once again, this time to Marske-by-the-Sea, a small coastal town in North Yorkshire. This move marked the beginning of Stephen's adult life in England. Despite his disabilities, he was determined to lead an independent and fulfilling life. He began working at Leonard Cheshire Home, also known as Marske Hall. Fast forward a few years to when Stephen was 23 years old, he abruptly disappeared. He was attending the Rathbone Society in nearby Redcar, an organization that worked with people with disabilities to improve their employment skills. Those who knew Stephen described him as a sociable character, well liked by his friends. He had a great sense of humor and an infectious laugh that made people enjoy being around him. Despite his friendly nature and his achievements, Stephen faced ongoing challenges. His sister Victoria later recalled that while their childhood was filled with love, Stephen's limitations sometimes got him down. He worked hard and excelled in his courses, but found that employers were often hesitant to hire him due to his disability. The events leading up to Stephen's disappearance began on December 28, 1992. It was a Monday, and the Christmas bank holiday weekend was drawing to a close. Stephen's father had a ticket to watch a Middlesbrough football match that day. Stephen had expressed interest in attending the game with his father, but Charles told him he could only go if he paid for his ticket himself. According to his parents, it was a running joke in the family that Stephen didn't like to spend his own money on anything. In the end, Stephen decided not to attend the match. Instead, Stephen went on a family walk with his parents along the beach at Saltburn-by-the-Sea. During this outing, Stephen was wearing a maroon crew neck jumper, a navy blue parka with a fur hood, blue denim jeans, and gray trainers. As the walk was coming to an end at approximately 3 p.m., they approached the promenade near Saltburn Pier. It was here that Stephen said he needed to use the restroom. He headed towards the men's side located near the pier, while his mother went to use the women's side. According to the missing persons report filed at the time, Doris exited the women's restroom and waited for Stephen, but he never appeared. At this point, accounts of what happened next become somewhat unclear and have been subject to scrutiny over the years. According to initial reports, Doris assumed that Stephen had finished before her and had started to make his way home. She reportedly continued on her way, expecting to find Stephen at their house. However, when Doris arrived home, Stephen was nowhere to be found. As time passed and Stephen failed to return, concern grew. His personal belongings, including his wallet, glasses, and watch, were all still at home, suggesting he had not planned to go anywhere else. After authorities were contacted, the police advised Stephen's parents to wait 72 hours before filing an official missing person report, a standard procedure at the time for adults. This 72-hour waiting period, while frustrating for the family, was intended to allow time for individuals who may have left voluntarily to return home. However, in Stephen's case, this delay may have hampered the initial search efforts during a critical time window. Despite this official stance, the Clarks did not remain idle. They began their own search efforts, combing the area around where Stephen was last seen. Once the official missing person report was filed, the police launched their investigation. The initial investigation focused on gathering information about Stephen's last known movements and his physical description. Stephen was described as 6 feet 3 inches tall with a medium build, blue eyes, and brown hair. As news of the disappearance spread, the local community rallied to assist in the search. Posters were distributed and local media outlets carried appeals for information. The case quickly gained national attention, with Stephen's disappearance featured on television in 1993. As the investigation progressed, several reported sightings emerged, each offering a glimmer of hope, but also adding to the mystery surrounding Stephen's disappearance. These sightings, while numerous, can be categorized into 3 main groups: those occurring immediately after his disappearance, those reported in the following weeks, and later sightings that emerged as the investigation continued. One of the most significant early sightings came just 2 days after Stephen's disappearance. On December 30th, 1992, a man named Stan Kameish reported seeing Stephen in Redcar Town Center, approximately 6 miles from Saltburn and 4.5 miles from Marske. Stan, who knew Stephen and his father Charles from their local pub, initially reported a clear and definitive sighting. He stated that he had not only seen Stephen, but had also spoken to him. This account seemed particularly credible because Stan recounted the story immediately to a woman he met shortly after the alleged encounter. According to this woman, Stan had briefly left her company on the high street and returned asking if she had seen who he was talking to. When she said she hadn't, he described Stephen, whom she also knew from the pub. At the time, they didn't think much of it, only realizing its significance when Stephen was officially reported missing. However, the credibility of this sighting would later be called into question. In 1999, Stan reportedly changed his account, stating that he had only seen the man from afar and recognized his distinctive walk, but hadn't actually seen his face. This change in testimony added a layer of uncertainty to what had been considered one of the most reliable post-disappearance sightings. Another significant reported sighting came on January 14, 1993, over 2 weeks after the disappearance. A woman living on Balmoral Gardens in Saltburn who knew Stephen reported seeing him at around 5 p.m. from her living room window. This sighting was particularly intriguing because the woman claimed to see Stephen walking with an older man, aged 50 to 60 years old. She described the man as being of medium build, bald with gray hair around the sides, and wearing glasses. She stated that Stephen and the older man were walking towards Glenside Terrace. Importantly, she noted that Stephen and the man were not talking, and it appeared as though Stephen was walking to keep up with him. The credibility of this sighting was bolstered by the woman's claim that she knew Stephen because her relative worked at a bowling club where both Stephen and a family member were members. She was also aware that Stephen was missing, having seen reports in the media. However, when the new investigation team later looked into this reported sighting, they noted some potential issues. The property where the reporting person was living at the time was in a row of terraced houses on Glenside in Saltburn. Investigators found that there was a significant distance between the living room window and the other side of the road. Moreover, it would have been dark at the time of the potential sighting, potentially affecting visibility. A third significant sighting emerged much later in the investigation, providing a potential new timeline for Stephen's movements on the day of his disappearance. In September 2020, nearly 3 decades after Stephen went missing, a potential witness came forward with new information. This witness reported seeing a man they believed to be Stephen between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. on December 28, 1992, in close proximity to his home address in Marsk. This sighting was considered particularly important because it placed Stephen in Marsk before it got dark, which occurred at approximately 3:45 p.m. that day. The witness reported that the man believed to be Stephen was walking in the direction of the Ship Inn. This sighting, if accurate, would suggest that Stephen had made it back to Marsk after his last confirmed sighting in Saltburn, potentially altering the timeline of his disappearance. In a shocking turn of events, Stephen's elderly parents, Doris and Charles Clark, then in their early 80s, were arrested on suspicion of his murder in September 2020. This development stunned the local community and the Clarks themselves, who vehemently denied any involvement in their son's disappearance. The couple's home and garden in Marsk were searched by police as part of the investigation. After approximately 17 weeks, on February 15, 2021, Cleveland police announced that the Clarks had been released from the investigation without charge. The couple described the 5-month period between their arrest and release as mental torture, with Charles noting that the police had carried out a full search of their home, including digging up the garden and moving their shed. Diane Suzuki, a 19-year-old dance instructor and student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, disappeared on July 6, 1985, after teaching a class at the Rosalie Woodson Institute of Dance in Aiea, Hawaii. She was known for her vibrant personality and ambitious nature, traits that endeared her to friends, family, and acquaintances. In college, she was studying journalism. In addition to her studies, Diane worked part-time as a dance instructor at the Rosalie Woodson Institute of Dance. Diane's employment at the dance studio played a significant role in the events surrounding her disappearance. It was at this location that she was last seen on the fateful day of July 6, 1985. During the same time frame as Diane's disappearance, Hawaii was grappling with a series of unsolved killings. At least 9 women on Oahu had been murdered, their cases remaining unresolved. Among these victims were Lisa Au and Regina Sakamoto. 5 of these cases, including Sakamoto's, were attributed to an unidentified serial killer known as the Honolulu Strangler. These victims were found with their hands tied behind their backs, a signature of the unidentified killer. It's important to note, however, that Diane Suzuki's disappearance did not fit the profile of the Honolulu Strangler's victims. This distinction would become significant in the investigation that followed, as it suggested that her case might be unrelated to the serial killings that had alarmed the community. On July 6, 1985, 19-year-old Diane began what seemed to be an ordinary day. She was scheduled to teach a children's dance class that afternoon at the Institute of Dance. Diane arrived at the dance studio well before her class was set to begin. The class she was teaching that day was scheduled to end at 3 p.m., after which Diane had plans to meet with friends for an outing to the north shore of Oahu. As the clock approached 3, Diane was observed teaching her class, seemingly without any indication of distress or unusual circumstances. When the class concluded, Diane's friends were expecting to meet her shortly thereafter. They arrived at the dance studio at around 3:15 p.m., expecting Diane to be there. However, as time passed with no sign of her, concern began to grow among her waiting friends. Puzzled by this uncharacteristic tardiness, her friends decided to investigate. They began by checking the immediate vicinity of the dance studio, including the parking lot next door. It was there that they made a disturbing discovery. Diane's car was still parked in its usual spot. This finding immediately raised alarms, as it was highly unusual for her to leave without her vehicle. Increasingly worried, Diane's friends returned to the dance studio to search for any signs of her whereabouts. Inside, they made another unsettling discovery. Diane's purse containing her keys and other personal belongings had been left behind. The presence of the car, purse, and keys, coupled with Diane's absence, painted a concerning picture. Her friends who knew her well understood that this behavior was completely atypical. Diane was not the type of person to simply vanish without informing anyone, especially when she had concrete plans. As the reality of the situation began to sink in, Diane's friends made the decision to contact her parents, Masaharu and Yuri Suzuki. They informed them of their daughter's unexplained absence and the troubling circumstances surrounding it. Upon receiving the alarming news, Mr. and Mrs. Suzuki immediately took off. Filled with worry and hoping for the best, they quickly made their way to the Rosalie Woodson Institute of Dance. They arrived at the dance studio and, with growing anxiety, decided to wait in their car in the parking lot. Their hope was that Diane might return at any moment to retrieve her belongings. As they sat vigilantly watching the studio entrance, they witnessed a scene that would later become a crucial element in the investigation. At some point during their wait, the parents observed 3 individuals exiting the dance studio. What caught their attention was that these people were carrying a large, heavy trunk. The size and apparent weight of the trunk were significant enough that it required all 3 individuals to maneuver it. The Suzukis watched as the trio loaded this substantial trunk onto a vehicle. At the time, this sight, while unusual, did not immediately trigger suspicion in Diane's parents. They had no reason to connect this activity with their daughter's disappearance, and in their state of worry and hope, they likely dismissed it as unrelated studio business. It was only later, as the investigation unfolded, that this observation would take on a more ominous significance. As time passed, with no sign of Diane, the level of concern escalated dramatically. Eventually, with all other options exhausted and fear mounting, the parents officially reported their daughter as a missing person. The investigation began on the evening of July 6th. Initially, as is common in missing person cases, investigators considered the possibility that Diane had left voluntarily. However, the circumstances surrounding her disappearance quickly raised red flags for the detectives assigned to the case. One of the first steps taken by investigators was to secure the dance studio as a potential crime scene. Crime scene technicians combed through the studio, paying particular attention to the areas where Diane was last seen. They collected potential evidence, including fingerprints and any items that seemed out of place or potentially relevant to Diane's disappearance. Detectives began by interviewing Diane's friends who had been waiting for her on the day she vanished. These interviews provided crucial information about Diane's last known movements and her state of mind before her disappearance. The friends recounted their growing concern when Diane failed to show up for their planned outing and described their actions in searching for her at the dance studio. The investigators then turned their attention to Diane's family, conducting in-depth interviews with her parents. During these interviews, the Suzukis provided important background information about their daughter, including her daily routines, relationships, and any recent changes in behavior they might have noticed. It was during these conversations that investigators learned about the curious incident the family had witnessed while waiting for Diane, the sight of 3 individuals carrying a large trunk out of the studio. This information about the trunk immediately piqued the interest of the detectives. They began to focus on identifying these individuals and determining the contents and destination of the trunk. This lead would eventually point them towards Dewey Hamasaki, a photographer who worked at the dance studio. As the investigation progressed, detectives cast a wide net, interviewing Diane's colleagues at the dance studio, her classmates, and her boyfriend Lester Ganton. One of the most significant developments in the early stages of the investigation came when detectives interviewed the photographer I mentioned. Hamasaki, who had been identified as one of the individuals seen carrying the trunk, quickly became a person of interest in the case. During his initial interview, investigators noted several concerning factors. Hamasaki was known to have expressed romantic interest in Diane, despite her not reciprocating these feelings. He had been present at the dance studio on the day of Diane's disappearance, and he had visible scratches on his body, which he attributed to an encounter with his father's pet rooster. These factors, combined with his involvement in moving the mysterious trunk, led investigators to focus more intensely on him. They requested that he take a polygraph test, which he agreed to do, and the results showed that he failed the test completely. Despite the failed polygraph and the suspicious circumstances surrounding Hamasaki, investigators faced a significant challenge: the lack of physical evidence. Without a body or clear signs of foul play, they couldn't definitively prove that a crime had occurred, let alone that Hamasaki was responsible. This lack of concrete evidence would continue to hamper the investigation in the years to come. As the investigation continued, detectives became increasingly convinced that Diane was a victim of foul play. The focus on Dewey Hamasaki intensified. Investigators thoroughly examined his background, interviewed his family and associates, and scrutinized his movements around the time of Diane's disappearance. They were particularly interested in the pig farm owned by Hamasaki's family, considering it a potential location where evidence might be hidden. However, despite their suspicions, investigators were unable to gather enough evidence to charge Hamasaki or anyone else with a crime related to Diane's disappearance. The case began to cool, transitioning from an active investigation to a cold case. In the early 1990s, approximately 5 to 6 years after the disappearance, a breakthrough came with the introduction of luminol to the Honolulu Police Department's investigative toolkit. Luminol is a chemical compound that, when sprayed on surfaces, reacts with the iron in hemoglobin found in blood, causing it to emit a blue chemiluminescence. This technology allows investigators to detect trace amounts of blood that are invisible to the naked eye, even if someone has attempted to clean or remove the evidence. The use of luminol in the Diane Suzuki case marked the first time this technology was employed in a criminal investigation in Hawaii. This groundbreaking application of forensic science brought renewed hope to the cold case and led to a series of new investigative efforts. Armed with this new technology, investigators sought search warrants for 2 key locations: the Rosalie Woodson Institute of Dance, where Diane was last seen, and the pig farm belonging to the Hamasaki household. Initially, only the warrant for the dance studio was approved. When investigators applied luminol to the studio's bathroom, they made a chilling discovery. The chemical reaction revealed traces of blood that had been invisible during previous searches. This finding was significant as it suggested that the bathroom might have been the site where Diane was attacked. The presence of blood in a location where Diane was last seen alive provided strong evidence that foul play had indeed occurred. However, the investigators faced a significant challenge. While they had detected blood in the bathroom, they lacked a sample of Diane's blood for comparison. Without this crucial piece of evidence, they couldn't definitively link the blood found to Diane. It took another 6 months before investigators were granted a search warrant for the Hamasaki family's pig farm. This delay would prove to be a significant factor in the investigation's outcome. When investigators finally accessed the property, they made several intriguing discoveries. One of the most notable findings was a section of stone wall that appeared to have been recently rebuilt. As investigators focused their attention on this area, they observed that Dewey Hamasaki's father became visibly agitated. This reaction raised suspicions among the investigators, prompting them to examine the wall and the surrounding area more closely. In a surprising turn of events, one of the investigators decided to remove the stump of a banana tree on the property and began digging in that location. This seemingly random action led to a significant discovery. Buried beneath the stump were clothes that closely matched the description of what Diane had been wearing when she disappeared. Even more telling, the clothes were of a size consistent with Diane's build. To further investigate the rebuilt wall, investigators conducted soil tests. The results indicated that the wall had been reconstructed only about 6 months prior to their search. This timeline was particularly significant as it coincided with the period between the initial investigation and the current search. Investigators theorized that this reconstruction might have been an attempt to conceal evidence related to Diane's disappearance. These findings at the pig farm, combined with the blood evidence from the studio, provided investigators with the strongest leads they had encountered since Diane's disappearance. However, they also highlighted the challenges posed by the 6-month delay between the two search warrants. Investigators believed that this gap might have provided an opportunity for potential evidence to be moved or concealed. While these forensic advances and new pieces of evidence were promising, they still fell short of providing conclusive proof of what had happened to Diane or who was responsible for her disappearance. The lack of Diane's DNA for comparison, the absence of a body, and the time that had elapsed since her disappearance all contributed to the difficulties in building a solid case. In 1993, buoyed by these new findings, city prosecutor Keith Kaneshiro, who was a close friend of the Suzuki family, attempted to move the case forward. He presented the results of the investigation, including the forensic evidence, to 3 separate investigative grand jury sessions. Despite these efforts, the court ultimately declined to press charges, citing a lack of damning evidence.